Yeah. So, Sasha, why don't you tell Jurgs a little bit about your show and what you're doing?
So I have two podcasts. I have the high functioning disasters where I'm just trying to normalize where, we all have hard lives at some point and we're really high functioning toward people who don't really know what's going on at home or wherever the hard stuff that we're dealing with. But then like behind the scenes, it's just, everybody's chasing their own tail and we feel like we're falling apart and nothing is great. But I also have a bariatric podcast called Life in the Berry Lane. And so that's just for bariatrics. 'Cause, my husband and I both have bariatric surgery.
So, I'm a dummy. I don't know what that is. So tell me what that is.
Oh, bariatric surgery? Oh, it's weight loss surgery. So like there's several different things, gastric bypass, there's sleeve surgery, and then there are some other ones that I don't really understand what they are, but we've both had gastric bypass surgery.
I see. Okay. Well, thank you for that. Um, yeah. So I think you and Jurg should definitely talk about maybe some of your stuff might be appropriate for some of his uh,
Absolutely.
channels. But yeah, Jurg, tell us a little bit about what you're doing and what's going on with
That's
and
good,
all
is
your
it?
changes you're in the middle of.
Oh boy. I don't think I'm going to let you rephrase that because in the past 72 hours, when you say all of the
Okay,
changes,
maybe.
that includes some drama that we
Oh,
won't force on you today. But my name is Ross Yerger. I'm a retired Secret Service agent from the U.S. Well, a retired special agent from the U.S. Secret Service. Uh, I have a degree in history and political science from Penn State University. And I'm using the three of those to do Up the Middle, a political podcast that we try to also lower the temperature. I'm not too good at it as David is, but we try. We give it the college try and discuss politics from a real perspective. From my thing is that so many of the other talking heads out there are desk jockeys. I was there. I was the duty agent for the Philadelphia field office on 9/11. I was about 30 yards to Barack Obama's right when he was sworn in as our first black president. Yeah, all kinds of really cool and really scary things in history. And so it's a perspective that literally nobody else can offer, or few can offer. And so I take that, I give that, I try, as the title suggests, to be up the middle. I'm interpreted as being left leaning, and I explain that away to the issues that are in society today. But nevertheless, I'm critical of both sides. Um, I'm open, most importantly, and this is something that David has really taught me, is to be open to hearing the other side. And I've learned I wasn't too good at that at first. That expertise kind of got to me, and I've changed that in 3 years. Probably some work still to be done, and I'm happy to continue that. And that's why I come to things like this, because not only am I contributing, I'm learning. I know Dave from other meetings, and David. I'm pointing to different areas of my monitor, uh, and people that they've both introduced me to. Has been an amazing experience. From that, I've created Mastiff Media, as you see on the bottom corner of the screen. That's the company that does Up the Middle. We also now have 6 radio stations with some more on the way. And we're branching into TV, 24/7 video streaming. So if you do video with your podcast, we want to talk to you about that too, in addition to the audio only. So thank you for having me, David. Always a pleasure.
Yeah, thanks for joining in. So I think we can jump in, and if anybody else comes in as a podcaster, we'll bring them up to speed. Um, so I wanted to. We talked a little bit before, but not a lot, What I was going to have some fun with is, I went to this event, and this is not the first time I'm sure we've all heard this kind of thing out in public, but I went to this event in the DC area, and one of the nights was a kind of a big panel, and there was a lot of people there, and a lot of the public was invited to this event in a big auditorium. So there was an opportunity, sort of in the cocktail hour afterwards, and even in the audience before it started, to chat with like real people about things. And you talk to people and you're having this conversation, and like for some people, I was saying, oh, I have this show and we talk about this and that, and they go, well, when you say show, what are you talking about? And I would say, oh, I have a podcast, and they'd be like, oh, okay, here he goes, got a podcast. They kind of roll their eyes a little bit, and so yeah, I kind of get that attitude sometimes, and then other people just sort of flat out say, well, I don't listen to podcasts, right? So I thought the question today, or the sort of prompt we could talk about is, you know, explain to people what a podcast is, and get them hooked. Like, get them hooked on why they think they're not going to get something out of a podcast. Change their mind. Who wants to go first?
Well,
I can. Oh, go ahead.
yeah, no, I'll let you, because I know I'm not going to stick with just podcasts.
Yeah.
Okay.
I try to let podcasts go first.
So I was just going to say that I kind of liken it to something like Netflix or Hulu or something. It's on demand, really. Um, your podcaster has a topic and they talk about it. They can be solo or have guests on to talk about those same topics, and you can go find an episode and listen to it whenever you want and repeat it as much as you like. And most of them are free. Some people have um, paid subscription for content, but usually free. You can learn all kinds of things too.
Yeah, I'll add that I'm not surprised to hear David's not David's reactions, but the reactions that David was given with regards to podcasting, because it happened in social media too. How many people do you know or have seen, not necessarily know? That's the point, is that you don't know them, yet they fancy themselves influencers. And now Facebook allows an occupation to be public figure. Man, I was recognized in Walmart one time because of my podcast. And it was Walmart. It's not like I was recognized at the Flyers game or something like that. It was Walmart. One that I'm at all the time. So, oh, I've seen you here before. That kind of thing. I think what people need to realize is that this is where you're going to be getting your news from. The legacy media, or the corporate media, however you want to call it, has failed. And in the process, when you see the chairman of the FCC hinting around at firing Jimmy Kimmel the day before he gets fired, say that to me and see what happens, and see how fast I laugh. And that's where a lot of better communication is coming from. The video that I get of ICE raids and of closed door meetings at the White House and in Congress, nothing like what we see on TV. And I think those that are bigger than me right now, which is all of them, need to get those same contacts. And that's why I'm very grateful for the career that I've had, is that I still have those contacts and they're coming to fruition. It's just time to sit. And this was the election. 2008 was the election known for social media, because Barack Obama took particularly email campaigns, but also social media, and really incorporated it into his campaign. This was the presidential campaign known for the independent media, the independent journalism, because so much was done from both the left and the right by so many different independents that until now, nobody heard of. Now people know who Charlie Kirk is, and Ben Shapiro, and Cameron Cowan, another contributor to Yerg's Radio. People know who these people are now, and they're relied upon. And so it's a big responsibility that's coming.
Before we go too far, I want to make sure everyone gets a chance to tell us about your show too. So let's not skip that part. But we'll go ahead and finish up with this question real quick, and then we'll make sure everybody gets time to do that. But Dave, what have you got to say about this question of tell people why, get people hooked on, tell people what a podcast is and get people hooked on it?
It's funny because there's a conversation within podcasting and creating podcasting and content, and then there's a conversation outside of that for people who access it. So if somebody says to me, Mr. Beckmeyer, hey, I saw your podcast, I heard your podcast, I'm like, awesome, then we're doing something. Yeah, I heard it on TikTok, the 10-second clip of your show. And you're like, well, great. I'm glad that we're connecting. That's awesome that you found the show. There is a 45-minute version of the content, and that's a 10-second little sliver of it. But in my mind, anybody that finds us, however it's video, audio, social media, I think that's great. And I think we as content creators, as we may agree to disagree with each other about the delivery method of how things get to people, we need to just understand that when we say, find me wherever you find your podcast, to some people, a 10-second clip on TikTok is a podcast. So if we want to use those words and have them to be effective, then we need to be where the audience considers a podcast to be. Whether we agree or disagree with what we want our podcast to be known as, where the people are, without them, we really don't have any content. So we kind of need to serve them where they think podcast is. So whether, again, my TikTok clips are not my best of my best of my best and not my main focus. My creating my show, having great interviews, great contacts, and great content is my focus. How it's delivered, that's the debatable part, I think, from a content creator's point of view. And I don't think we can get everybody, every podcaster and content creator together to organize and come up with a definition. People are trying right now. I've heard people say that a podcast is anything that you can partake in with your eyes shut. I'm like, well, okay. Well, what about video podcasts? What about YouTube? What about, all of the amazing content creators out there that are video first? There's a lot of this stuff going on. At the end of the day, it's what people call it. So I'll give a quick example. My friend said, can you go out to my car and get my sunglasses? I'm like, great. What kind of car do you drive? It's a Ford F-150. I'm like, well, that's a truck. That's not a car, right? A car is a car. But to them, a car is a truck, a van, a whatever. A car is a car, right? So again, there's this definition thing that we're wrestling with in content creation right now. So to me, a car doesn't have a big back end on it that you can put a piece of construction material in it. That's a truck to me, right? So we have this definition thing that we're going to be wrestling with for a long time in podcasting. So I think that if we can all agree that the user at the end of the day is the prime reason we do it and the prime definition of what a podcast is, I think we can keep them in mind in the conversations. I think that's really important. So thanks, Dave.
Yeah, we're gonna keep exploring this. So welcome, Cameron. We're celebrating International Podcast Day, and so that's cool. And then we're also asking the prompt of sort of like I was talking about how I was at this event recently, talked to people in the public, and you'd say you have a podcast, and people kind of roll their eyes. Oh boy, here he is, another goofball with a podcast. And then and it seems to have little credibility. And also other people just say, well, I don't listen to podcasts. Like they don't even know what that means. I don't do that. And so I was thinking about, so the question is sort of like, what what is a podcast, and then how can you convince people it's how can you tell people, like, because there's this perception, and maybe I'll ask this to you, Dave, that why do you think people think a podcast isn't going to offer them something they don't already have?
Part of it, I think, is it's that it's free, and that because it's free, there's so much of it, and there's a very low barrier to entry. Radio, you have to have a station, you have to have a license, you have to have rules, there's a whole world there just to get on a radio. So nobody can just jump in and create a radio show from nothing. Ross is doing an amazing job, but for somebody like me to say today, I'm just going to start spinning records from Ariana Grande. No, that's not really kind of how it happens. You kind of have to have something behind it. A podcast you can spin up pretty quickly, start building a community. But all of this kind of leads me to, where's the quality then in all of this? If it's so simple to make, how do we make it better? How do we make it better for the viewer or the listener? Right. So that's kind of the challenge in all of this. It's so easy to get into, but how do we make it better, and how do we connect better with that audience? Right. So yeah.
So Cameron, thanks, Dave. So Cameron, if you ran into someone and they said, oh, podcast, what's that? Or if you just met maybe someone who said, I don't even know what that is, what would you tell them a podcast is, and why? How would you get them hooked on listening, or why a podcast? Get them hooked on the whole idea of podcasting.
Yes, well, sorry I'm late, everyone. Over at Suit Media, we completed our sale of an acquisition of Plank Sip of Philosophy brand today, and that is required. That is, thank you very much. Unfortunately, when one is an executive, that requires a lot of hubbub and brouhaha. And I was dealing with both of those things, and that's why I was late. So sorry about that, everyone. Hi, hello. When it comes to getting people on board with podcasting and listening and all this type of thing. When I very first started way back in 2014, podcasting was not what it is today. Joe Rogan hadn't really started yet. A lot of the big names didn't exist yet. And so when I said, "Oh, I have a podcast," because I was actually doing a podcast and video separate. Now they're merged together, but back then I did them separate because I'm always doing the most. And Uh, and I kind of always described it as a conversation. And back then people didn't even know there was that app on their phone yet. Like I would literally take people's phones and be like, in this one over here, and here's where I am. And they'd be kind of like, oh yeah, I never even knew what that was. Like people just did not know. I
Well,
left the business.
I'll say that's literally still true, because I did that with like 3 people today.
Yeah, well, my experience was a little bit different because I left the business for 3 years, and when I got back into it, I very rarely had those conversations now. People are much more aware of what this is. Bearing in mind, podcasting is a medium that has existed since 2002. Like, we're talking something that's been around for 23 years. This podcasting is old enough to drink alcohol. It's almost ready to rent a car. And I very rarely have that conversation anymore, but I still find that there's you still sometimes have that. So I find now it's a lot easier maybe to get people involved. Podcasting is a conversation, therefore people have to be interested in joining in this conversation with you. And I noticed, especially as someone who has very much struggled to find an audience and community, and as someone who is just now breaking through, maybe getting some bigger traction, all this type of thing, is people have to want to talk to you, and have to want to listen to you. There's a couple podcasts I listen to quite faithfully, and it's because I genuinely enjoy the people, what they have to say, their shtick, whatever have you. Some people listen to podcasts to improve themselves, improve their business, improve their career, lock in, whatever have you. Um, which sometimes makes it difficult for me because it's kind of like, well, kind of where do I go? Where do I fit? Because I talk about books and what's essentially become a post-literate society. So that's a bit difficult. And so I find that if they like me and they find me personable and they find me smart and all this type of thing, they're much more likely to engage with the show. You were talking about TikTok. My biggest growth has been from short video, YouTube Shorts, TikTok, Instagram Reels, all this type of thing. And for me, it kind of sucks because they get between 30 seconds, maybe 2 minutes of what was 45 minutes of content, sort of thing. But the part that I do love is that people who are not necessarily going to sit down and listen to long form do get something, particularly if it's salacious. So I appreciate them all the same. And some people, that's their only exposure to me at all. And other people are on a channel and they're listening to a whole show or they're watching a video or whatever. And my audience is very diverse because I go broad, not narrow. So I'm getting a lot of views and listens from a lot of places. I'm on 4 different video sites, all this type of thing. I distribute on 11 different podcast networks. So it's an odd thing. I think now people have a little bit of resistance because I think there is a lot of it. There's too much of it. I also think there's a little bit of political coding. Podcasting has become right-wing coded. Thank you, Joe Rogan. Thank you, Lex Friedman. Thank you, Logan Paul. All this type of thing. And I feel like as a medium, there's a non-zero amount of liberal-minded Democrat people who have kind of ceded that space because, well, they're 3 times the size we are and all this sort of thing. Um, so much so when I have conservative guests come on my show to talk shop, they are surprised that a liberal is doing podcasts because, well, they just don't do that sort of thing. So I think there's different odd political dynamics. I think a lot of people are very frustrated with this new medium that seems to have a lot of power, but you don't know who these people are because there's not, unlike our friends over at television radio, there's not a assiduous campaign of branding and marketing to push these people to get that brand familiarization. It's like all of a sudden someone you've never heard of that somehow has 10 million followers has said something somewhere, or for some reason, President Trump is going on their show, or Kamala Harris is going on, whatever have you. And people are kind of like, who is this person? There's no relationship. A lot of PR branding and marketing for people, for stars, is building a relationship. It's annoying to find out what Jennifer Aniston's diet secrets are for staying so thin at 40, but the reality is that Jennifer Aniston spent the last 30 years building a relationship with America. That's why she's one of the highest paid actresses in the game. Et al., Julianne Moore, Meryl Streep, insert famous names here. A lot of podcasters have really great relationships with the people already engaged, but that doesn't extend outward, sort of thing. And so I think people are just frustrated by all that because it's uncharted territory. It feels like you're walking into a wilderness and everyone's shouting at you. It's a very unpleasant experience. So in that way, podcasts are kind of marketed the same way books are, through word of mouth recommendation. You're much more likely to listen if your friend has said, "Oh, I really love so and so," or whatever have you. So it's a long story long, and this has gone on too long. I'll shut up now. It's complicated, it's hard, it's difficult, and there's too much of it. I think people feel lost. It's a new world, it's a new media, it's kind of right-wing coded, and I think that's where the rolling eyes kind of start to come from and all this type of thing. And low barrier to entry is 110% true. But here's the funny part about that. There may be a low barrier to entry, but most podcasts never make it past 3 episodes. Which means if you've recorded more than 3, you're officially more successful than most podcasts. If you're over, yes, that is the cause for celebration and such. Yes, if you're over the magic number of 152, your chances of becoming a profitable podcast are over 75%. I remember the day I hit 152, I said I've finally become a grown-up show. So it is one of those things, the old adage goes, 90% of the content on the internet is made by 10% of the people. Podcasting is the same. Honestly, success comes not necessarily because you had a breakthrough moment, but you just survived everyone else. You made more content than they did. And unfortunately, that doesn't help the listener any, but from a content point of view, the big names are the big names for a reason. So I don't know if that answers your question, but there we are.
Yeah. Like I said, I'm trying to figure out how can we tell people that their perceptions about podcasts, are sort of wrong. Like there's something you can get out of them, even though maybe you think you can't. Because that's probably the thing I hear the most is that, like, I'm not going to do that. I don't. This whole thing is not my thing, and I feel like there is, and it's a little bit like every other form of media, right? I mean, depending on what you listen to or watch or read, you can either get dumber or you can get smarter. So it doesn't automatically mean you'll get smarter just for listening to podcasts, right? And there is a bit of a lift to find good shows, in the mix. And what is the line? Podcast has a discoverability problem, but I think it also has kind of a quality problem. I think you were kind of hinting at this, Dave.
Yeah, I think so. I think it's something you want to invest in. If you want to make it, if you want this to become something where your voice matters and you want to connect with people over a period of time, I think you really need to invest in learning how to be good at what you're doing, put time and effort into this, make it a priority. I think the other part of podcasting that I think is our secret weapon is the companionship that we offer to the world, to our listeners and our community. I have one person reached out to me and they said to me, I listened to your show, but it's not about your content. I I have a podcast that teaches podcasting, and they're like, I'll never start a podcast, but I listen to your show because I like you, and you could talk about anything, and I would listen to your show. And I'm like, well, that's a different level altogether where they're finding companionship. And I think that's another beautiful thing where people on television and people out in the media, to have interaction with them, a meaningful connection with them beyond what you see on your screen or what you hear in your ears, but to actually have time with them, that's another level that we can offer in podcasting that I don't think can be matched, where we really can build an audience one person at a time and have time with our audience, have face to face or virtual connections with our audience where we can actually interact with them. I don't get that when I reach out to my local news on TV or whatever, my favorite person on TV on a TV show. The chances of them having time for me as a casual community member, listener, viewer, they don't have time for that. So in podcasting, we can leverage that connection and give our audience a chance to actually get to know us beyond the mic, beyond the camera. I think that's another secret thing that we can really leverage to build our audience over time.
Yeah, I was talking to a local radio, personality who, has a pretty big following, and they have radio behind them. They have all this marketing and all that kind of stuff. But they were like sort of jealous of like what we can do in terms of our interaction, the kind of relationships we can have with listeners. That they just can't have those kind of relationships. They can't go have a 10-minute, 15, 20-minute conversation with every single listener. I could literally do that, or certainly every listener that wanted to have that conversation, I could do that, right? And I think that they can't really do that with the audiences that they have. And something that I know Cameron said, and I think a couple of others has mentioned it too, that I think it's a big misperception in podcasts for podcasters that, the way you get people is you do, marketing blasts and you do a launch stuff and you do all this kind of traditional marketing. And I don't think that's true. I mean, I think the way you get a durable listener audience is one-on-one. Like it's through those recommendations. I mean, sure, people are going to discover your show, through all those mechanisms and that don't not do that. But I think for a really durable audience, it is a lot of those, personal recommendations that can really grow your show in a solid way where you really build a foundation. So I don't think we shouldn't discount that. And I know I always talk about how my listeners aren't really into kind of the self-indulgence kind of stuff. So I don't do a lot of things in my show about kind of one-on-one with the listener that much, because people kind of have given me feedback that's not really what they want. But then on the other hand, so I've got to find a way to kind of do that, connect with the listener in a way that makes them feel like they're part of the conversation. And we're gonna have a conversation about this on your show, on your meetup in a while, Dave. But this idea of not just speaking at sort of space, but like speaking to and with and communicating with a specific person. Sasha, you've been kind of quiet. Tell us about your show and tell us how you are convincing people that listen to your show that you are the way they need to spend their time.
Well, I'm not sure that that's what I'm doing, but um, uh, but I am definitely giving people the ability to share their stories for when they've, really had difficult times. And then also kind of what they did to get better. And, um, you know, hard times for a lot of people can be sort of a jumping off point or a springboard to something bigger and greater. But in the moment, we don't know that because it just feels so awful and we're just trying to survive. And so, one thing that podcasting has done for me is when I started this podcast, somebody I interviewed earlier today said, we do podcasts for ourselves. And for me, it was just to have something to do. I lost my job earlier this year in a reduction in force round. And, looking for a job is, you can only do that for so many hours a day. And so podcasting gives me something to do. But really, for the high functioning disaster, I am one of those. But I wanted to do it for other people. But I have gotten so much out of it, beyond the community that Dave Campbell has created. Each person that I interview brings something that I needed. And it's so mind blowing. Like, how did you know I needed that kind of thing? I mean, it wasn't for me. It was, they were telling their own stuff, but I get something from everybody, including Jacinta Field. I interviewed her. She started Happy Souls Kids. She's in Australia. I don't have children. And what she had to offer about children spoke to little girl me, like, oh, I understand, kind of those things my parents maybe were dealing with back then. And then also to be, have a bit more empathy and compassion and understanding for people who do have children and, what they're needing, the children in particular, what they're needing when they're having meltdowns, for example. So I don't know that I'm hooking people, but I'm hooked.
That's great. Yeah. Yeah, in terms of another definition, we talk about the definition of podcast. I saw this one from Stephen Goldstein, who says that a podcast has become shorthand for personality-driven, on-demand programming, no matter how the audience chooses to consume it. Which I think by that definition, I don't even know if I have a show because I don't see my show as personality-driven. Maybe it is. Yeah, you have a hand up, and so make sure you tell us about your show. You've already talked about it a little bit, but maybe folks join later. So go ahead and tell us about what your show, and then jump in with whatever you wanted to say.
So up the middle is political and kind of sometimes is personality based, because I, as of last night, tend to get a little animated. But it's one of the things I wanted to add to what Dave said, maybe contradict or not contradict, but challenge what Cameron said, or we can elaborate on it if there's more to it. But David alluded that, and actually Cameron alluded to this part as well, it being all over the place. When I first got into YouTubing and being on YouTube only, I was getting coached by this company called Think Media. They teach YouTube, and I almost fell into a trap because they said to use all of your social media to gear your audience to your YouTube channel. And I said, well, what if my audience isn't on YouTube? And at the time, my show for YouTube was about day trading. I was in the process of retiring from the Secret Service. I needed to supplement my income. I get into day trading, had an amazing first year that I should have never had, but I did. And I wanted to share that. So I created a YouTube channel, yada, 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 you know the drill. And I said, what if day traders or people who want to learn trading are not on YouTube, but because of the business aspect of this, are on LinkedIn. I grew my LinkedIn, what is it there, page, 3 times the size of my YouTube channel in a third of the time because I went to where they were. And I think that has to remain our job as broadcasters, internet radio, terrestrial radio, podcast, video, wherever we are, is to be where the audience that we're targeting is at. In the political spectrum, I see this, left wing and this right wing saying, we got this many million followers. Golf clap. You've got that many million followers of people who think like you. You've done nothing to reach out to the other side. And that's why, if not from a branding perspective, from an emotional perspective, I want to keep what David's taught me from crossing party lines and some of the other, just listening to outrage overload, is to keep the other side, whatever that side is. Me being up the middle, you'll love me one day and hate me the next. But keep the door open to that other side. And that's not just in politics. That's in whatever your niche is. Because you're going to say something about growing flowers. And somebody else is going to say, that's a weed. What are you growing that for? Well, you got to tell them why you like this weed. Maybe it's that kind of weed. I don't know. But to one of Cameron's points then, it was been known that the conservatives have been, and this is where I guess we throw in another platform, talk radio, as in terrestrial over the airwaves radio, AM, FM. And now he's saying that they're coming into podcasting, which I always thought was kind of owned by the libs. So my question to the panel, if I can throw this in, where are they at now? If the conservatives own podcasting too, where does the left go to find their like-minded people when they take a break from spying on the other side?
I definitely saw some research about this, that all these different media has become more, right dominated. I know, Cameron, you may know exactly the research I'm talking about and be able to cite it, but I know I read the research, I saw the research. I can't now cite it. I'll put it in some notes, but Cameron probably has an answer to that question. Actually, anybody else that has too can jump in.
It was a Mother Jones article that was posted after the election. I covered it on the Cameron Visual News Hour, Mondays at 7 Eastern.
Radio.
Yes, and you can hear the rebroadcast on Mastiff, yes, or they're at Mastiff Media. In fact, I just uploaded this week's episode. So that's there for you. But yeah, I mean the left, and David and I have talked about this. Left podcasting has never grown the same way as right-wing podcasting because the mainstream media still exists. Now, given their current performance, possibly for not much longer, which could be great news for us. But Dave and I talked about this extensively. The big networks and cable news really suck the air out of the room for the left. And the reality is, that makes it very hard for the left to compete online. The right grew spectacularly because they didn't really have anywhere else to go. They had talk radio, had it since the 80s when no one knew what to do with AM. A bunch of people bought up AM bandwidth for nothing, pennies. And that gave you Rush Limbaugh, Michael Medved, Michael Savage, names. Laura Ingraham started out on radio before she was on TV. People don't know that. Names. And that they had nowhere else to go. And in the online space, especially in probably from 2008 to about 2022 or so, the left tended to dominate the internet narratives as well. And that was backed up by major social media platforms. And that was also cancel culture and so on and such forth. The right had was kind of media homeless. They had Fox News, and that was kind of about it. And in the recent years, we've seen the rise of Newsmax, OAN, all this type of thing. They're kind of breaking into that traditional space a little bit more. But the right thrived online because there was nowhere else for them to go. The left has lots of places to go. Daily newspapers, television, especially. Radio not as much, but television and newspapers. I mean, I'm competing with Vox, The Atlantic, The New Yorker. That's my competition. And they're far, far bigger and far, far older than the Cameron Journal will ever hope to be. So that's part of the reason why the left has struggled in the online space. So the reality is, there's really nowhere for the left to go online. There's really not a lot of great places to find them. And to be very honest with you, I have struggled a lot in growing the show, because there's not a ready, accessible place for me to find my audience who's interested in my sort of old-fashioned way I cover the news. And despite, all the listens that I do get and being a top 10% podcaster in the world, um, and all this sort of thing, it's been a big, big struggle. And it's also made it hard to make it a business because of that. And I also think, again, kind of circling back to the whole podcasting has become right-wing coded. I think a lot of left people have become very turned off the medium because it seems like it's dominated by a certain type of guy. Um, and also I think, as is so many things, podcasting does tend to be very male dominated, although there are wonderful female podcasts. Sort of thing. It does tend to be very male dominated sort of thing. And that definitely also kind of makes things a bit of a struggle as well. And that can be frustrating for people, but I think it's very hard. There's not an easy way for moderate or left-leaning people. There's not a place for us to slot in. The market's very bifurcated. For social media, we've got Blue Sky, but Blue Sky is relatively small. Um, I don't have traction on Twitter X anymore. I used to. A third of my traffic to the Cameron Journal came from X back in the day. That dropped to zero when Elon bought it. The day after it dropped to zero. It has never recovered, and I still subscribe to premium and everything. Um, it's hard out there. There's not really a place for us. And
So I just want to
there's
make
not
sure
any
too, we
one
know
place
that.
the left is hanging out. That's the big problem.
But I want to make sure everyone knows, so they can find your work at the Cameron Journal, right? That's the best place to start.
Oh, yes, if you're interested in listening, CameronJournal.com, and I'm on every major podcast app, so just look up Cameron Journal, I'm the only one like that, and you'll find me. So,
And if you're interested in becoming a podcaster, among his other 9 shows, and one of Dave's flagship shows is the How to Podcast series. He's in Canada, but he helps people all over the world. So tell us a little bit about your podcasting adventures, Dave.
Yeah, I watch the conversation happening across the border with you guys and go, "Whoo, there's a lot going on down there." We just stay on our side of the fence here, and we're wishing you guys all well because we want you guys to do well down there. So, yeah. So, for me, it's just howtopodcast.ca, because I'm in Canada, is where I help podcasters to find their voice, no matter what path they pick to get their community built and their show on their go. And we do a meetup twice a week as well. And Dave's been there, and Sasha's been there. We have some really great people that have been part of the group. But yeah, so we're just here to build community and help people find their voice and to be an encouragement. I think that's one thing all of us can come away from a conversation like this is how can we support each other? Even if we have a different opinion on life and how we approach life and what we believe, how can we be a supportive ally to each other to help share voices? And what I love really truly as a Canadian watching our US friends again is when we have two people who don't see eye to eye on a topic but have a robust conversation, walk away from the table. They're still friends. They can still hang out together. They're not mortal enemies. But hearing two different sides and having people go, yeah, I hear what you're saying and you're making me think. I love those kind of conversations than a bunch of people who all agree with each other because I don't get much value in that because it's just, again, one side of the puzzle, and there's always another side of the puzzle. Your puzzle might be upside down and you don't even know it. So flip over all the pieces and have a conversation with each other and challenge each other, because we're listening. And as we listen to great, robust conversations, I think that's the one thing, again, you're not going to get on traditional media. There's always a slant. There's always a reason why they're reporting something the way they're reporting it. So if we can have a robust conversation, I think that's really going to help maybe move the narrative forward a little bit better and give more people voices in podcasting, so that nobody feels like they're on the outside looking in, going, I have a message, I have something I want to share, but I don't know how to get in here. So the more people who come to the mic and to the camera, I think it'll make us all better. So that's kind of my thoughts. Thanks, guys.
Yeah, that's great. So yeah, everybody knows, you can find all my stuff at outrageoverload.net. We have 3 shows, and the flagship shows Outrage Overload, but then we also do other things, goofy things like this even, but mostly things like, I also write on Substack, so you can also find that on there. And if you are thinking about a podcast, thinking about you might be interested in doing one, definitely connect with Mr. Campbell at howtopodcast.ca. And also join that meetup group. I'm sure you can find that by just searching How to Podcast series on Meetup. That's a free to join. Anybody can join those meetups. We do Saturday mornings. Well, Saturday mornings my time. I guess it's afternoon your time, but late morning. It's late morning. I don't remember. Anyway, we do one on Saturdays, and then we do also kind of a quick get-togethers on Tuesdays optionally as well. So, and those are definitely helpful, but also Dave Campbell himself is very helpful to folks in the podcasting space. So if you're interested in becoming a podcaster, that's a great place to start. Well, I appreciate everybody being here. Any final thoughts? Let's start with Jurgs. Dave, you kind of already gave us your final thoughts, I guess, but if you want to jump in, feel free.
David said something that I deal with a lot. All I ask of my listeners is to consider what I say, what I share, and then use that. And I encourage people to do this with any podcast. Use that as a starting point as you do your own homework, research, whatever it is you're trying to learn or trying to enjoy. Do not let Cameron, do not let Dave, David, Jurgs, anybody, Sasha, any podcaster be your be-all, end-all source of information. That's just a bad thing. And by finding that information or additional information or contrary information somewhere else, you're going to listen to another podcast, or you're going to find something else, some other medium that you're going to find enjoyable or informative. Maybe you don't listen to it every day, but when you have a question on that issue, you come back to that podcast. And I think that's one of the biggest things that David mentioned about growing is the impression that we leave on our audience. And without question, the camaraderie and the community that is built. That's why at the end of my show, I'll say the same thing now. Don't forget to bookmark, like, share, subscribe, tell a friend, and keep talking. Thank you, David.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you. Sasha, any final thoughts?
Sorry. Yep. So I agree with all of that. And I just wanted to add that if you have a space or a thought or an idea that you want to share and you're not finding it out there, chances are you really will find it out there. But if you have a different angle, or if you just want to try, do it. To Cameron's point, most people don't get past 3 episodes or 3 interviews or whatever recorded. But if you think about it, that's not that many. 3. If you can get past that, that's a big hurdle. But just keep going. And if you join Dave's community, you'll learn that podcasting doesn't have a lot of rules around it. You can do your show how you want to do it.
And you don't
And
have to always do it the same forever. Like your 10th episode doesn't have to be exactly the same as your first episode.
exactly, it's what you want it to be. It's yours.
Awesome. Cameron, any final thoughts?
Yes, well, thank you for having me, everyone. I really appreciate it. Again, so sorry for being late. Um, and no, I agree with the sentiment about spreading the word about your favorite shows. I certainly try to do that at Soup Media with our Soupcast podcast network. We're trying to create that organically among audiences, that we have under our roof, which, includes a whole variety of things. Um, I think when it comes to podcasting, like any other media, it's always important to remember people's time is very limited. There's very kind of few parts of the day and busy lives that they have to listen to something and engage with something, and we're competing with Netflix, streaming, cable, everything sort of thing. And when I first started, I always told people, I said, the show is 45 minutes. So if you have a short commute, listen to half in the morning, half in the evening. If you have a long commute, take me to work with you. It's like I'm sitting there in the car and we're carpooling. And I still mention that from time to time because it gives people, oh, that's where you fit, like in their schedule, like take me to work with you, sort of thing. And so you have to kind of think about, people's consumption habits and all of that. But um it's been a really fun talking about this, and I'm always love meeting new faces. I'm also always reminded how hard it is to break through in my genre of news politics, as I recently started a morning zoo show with my buddies called The Living Joke. It's been so much easier to sell that show. It's like
Right.
we're talking about gaming, we're talking about sports. Last time we talked about a guy that beat some guy in a wrestling ring. It's so much easier to sell. But yeah, but it's important to think along those lines, and having and continuing these conversations is so wonderful and amazing. And yeah, I think this is going to be the media moving forward. It's smaller, it's balkanized, but you know what? It's also not super corporate controlled. You know who owns the Cameron Journal? Hi. I'm the Cameron in the logo. Who owns Outrage Overload? That guy, the white one with the beard. Sort of thing. It's like, Sasha, she's the gal in charge over there, like the real person. No need to talk to Bob Iger, sort of thing. So I think, moving forward as this medium begins to mature, sort of thing, there's still a lot of opportunity, but there's also things that are going to cement together. I think gathering together in networks is going to be very important. That's one of the reasons why we started one. And I've been personally kind of approaching some people to join. Even I'm sorry, did I say that out loud? Anyway, I think that sort of aggregation that we saw in radio and television in the 30s and 40s is probably the future of podcasting as well. And I think you'll see some of the bigger names start doing that and having other side shows and all this type of thing. But it's a wonderful medium. As someone who started out in terrestrial radio, it's always a lot of fun. The video element is complicated, but that's okay. But it's just wonderful to share this time, and happy International Podcast Day, everyone. So thank you for having me.
Thank you. And yes, happy International Podcast Day. I guess one of the reasons I'll say to listen to a podcast is something that Sasha kind of hinted at, that whatever is your even the most narrowest interest, somebody's got a show about it. Probably more than one person has a show about it. And check them out. Like you'll be able to dive as deep as you want to dive to find somebody that just absolutely loves to investigate flies in South Dakota in March. And you have a whole
Lots
show
of
about
rabbit
that.
holes.
There's lots of rabbit holes, and there's just some fantastic content, and people talk about, we're in the terrible information age and all that, but I mean, yeah, there's bad information, but there is so much good information. So that's one of my one thing I'll say to folks. So again, thanks everybody for joining us. Dave, did you have any final comments?
No, just to say thanks, Dave, for hosting us and pulling this all together. It's great to be with all these amazing people, and thanks for doing this.
Yeah, well, thanks for joining us, everybody, and thanks all of you panelists. Thanks for making this a very interesting conversation, and happy International Podcast Day, everybody.
Thank you,
Thanks.
David. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you,
Bye-bye.
David.